day Ghana, every nation has got heroes. Some of these heroes are sunk and others are unsunk. Today we discuss one of the most illustrious sons of the Republic of Ghana. We are marking the fourth decade of the demise of Prime Minister Dr. Kofi Abrefa-Busia. Who was he? What was his political philosophy? What was his contribution to the independence struggle? And what kind of legacy did he leave the Republic of Ghana? To help us do the discussion, to my immediate right, we have the Ashanti Regional Secretary of the ruling NPP, Mr. Sampine. Mr. Sampine, you're welcome to the show. And then he's ably assisted by KG Osebunsu. He served as Minister of Security and State Protocol in the Second Republic during the time of Dr. Busia. Sir, you're welcome. History is made up of so many sand dunes. Beneath those sand dunes are treasures. How much of a treasure was Dr. Busia to the Republic of Ghana? Yes, sir.
He was a gem. I considered him a gem, and I still do. Very soft-spoken, and very thoughtful in everything he did. He loved this country and wanted us to be on the right path. And the way he carried us, if we Ghanaians had taken to him, I think we would have gone a lot further than we are now. Therefore, as far as I'm concerned, he was my leader and he is still my leader.
And what kind of a person was he? And how was his upbringing like? Did he grow up the normal way, or he had some privileges that made him quite unique from ordinary Ghanaians of the 40s and then 30s?
He came from a royal family
Yes.
in Winchi. And his uncle was the chief. And his father gave me to one Dr. and Mrs. Whittle, who were Methodist people in Winchi. They lived with him and trained him and took him to almost everywhere they went. So he had a Christian upbringing. And at the time that the stool became vacant, he decided that his younger brother should occupy this stool instead of he. So he had time to study, and he was in Wesley College in Kumasi. You know that.
Yeah.
Yes. And he was very well known in the college. Even when he was young, I believe in Folk 2, he took prizes, many prizes together. And very respectable, very respectful, serious thinking person. He took everything he did seriously. And everyone was his brother's keeper, as he usually said. Let us all make ourselves each other's keeper. That is from the Christian upbringing that was in
Mr. Sampine, Prime Minister Busia was a contemporary with your uncle,
My father.
your father. At a very tender age, did you have any personal engagement with him to share an interesting anecdote of your interaction with the old man?
Yeah, it's important to know that when people pay their dues to the nation, we give them the required recognition. I admired the late Professor when I began reading. Now, when we were little boys, kids, he visited my father. I quite remember when Cape Coast, before the coup in 1972, that he visited my old man. Actually, he recruited my father to be an organizer for the Center for Civic Education, which is now known as the NCC. He started as a district officer in Ofinso district and was then posted to Cape Coast as the regional organizer. And he took charge of the Ashanti region, the Central region, and the Western regions. When the old late Prof visited and we eavesdropped, the conversations, even though we were very young, was so articulate, so filled with knowledge, and I took to him. Therefore, I started reading a lot about him. I felt so pained when he was overthrown, even though I was a little boy. But then, in St. Augustine's, when we were starting our politics, started reading. I took a liking to him. I had lots of his books, his writings. My old man also wrote lots about him and going through the stuff that my old man left behind. After that, yes, that man, the late Professor Kufemi Fabuzia, was somebody that should have been the icon of most of the politicians in the country now.
What kind of energy did he reverberate? Would you say he was a pessimist or an optimist in the future of this republic?
He was very optimistic about building a nation that belonged to all. You know, his background has an ideology, and the ideology is not purely capitalist, but an ideology of developing in freedom. And therefore, he wished that every single Ghanaian had the right to develop their own capacity, possess whatever assets and properties that they could, get all the knowledge that they could. You see, people talk about education, and they talk about this junior high school, the experimental thing, and they attribute it to the late Champon. But I know that idea was spotted by the late Prof. Fabuzia, because I've seen a writing by my father indicating that way back 69, 70, he has some of the things to mold the Ghanaian into a person that if you're not able to go further to do white collar jobs, then there could be some vocation for you to train on. So he's somebody that, yes, revibrated and vibrated energies, optimism, and the goodwill for all to develop freely and in the best of freedoms.
Okay. Sir, he says a nation that doesn't honor its heroes is not worth dying for. We should give credit where credit is due. Would you say, sir, for someone in whose government you served, history has not been too fair to the late Professor and Prime Minister?
No, history has not. And I think that his counterparts in the other parties deliberately made sure that they did that he wasn't sunk as we should, and always thought that the way he handled things quietly and smoothly, he was a weak person. He wasn't. He was a very strong man and believed in what he wanted to do and did it. He was the first person to start rural development in this country, as a ministry in this country. And that was in 1969 when he became Prime Minister. We've carried it through these up to now. But I'm sure if he had had time to practice it and to improve upon it from 1969 till now, or till before he was overthrown, this country would have been very much improved by that.
I'll come to you, Mr. Sampan. You are an educationist. You are plucking a leaf from his playbook or life book, so to speak. You mentioned the junior high school model or system. What other significant contributions did he make in the area of education?
This ambassador was talking about rural development. Now, I remember upgrades of some of the training colleges in the country was under his watch. Bringing up senior high schools, secondary schools then, was also a priority for the late Prof. So a person who trained in West School as a teacher went further to lecture in universities and got his doctorate in philosophy and was so much enthused with education. He did all that he could to help. So when you read the books and you go back to history, you can clearly see that yes, he was so much into making sure that the best of knowledge per education given to the people of the country. So he never neglected the secondary education, training college education, and the support that he gave to those universities, especially University of Cape Coast, where they were training people especially for secondary schools and the specialist schools in those are they call the specialist schools and Winneba specialist school for teachers and the rest. He has lots of inputs to offer and to make sure yes they function well so that they brought the products that we're going to train people to become fruitful guys in society.
How tumultuous was his relationship with Osagyefo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah?
Well, if you go back to history and you pick down CPP against the United Party traditions, something that was common was that with the UGCC, all of them were involved until the break. Well, there's this ideology of socialism and communism as against developing a freedom, that's capitalism. So definitely that dichotomy was felt. And along the lines, some others felt, yes, the influence of Prof. Buzia was becoming so much, and therefore persecution had to set in. And that led to, according to history, why he even left the shores of Ghana to go into exile, a painful experience for any person on this planet that yeah, for reason not best your own acceptance, you leave your place of abode and go to settle somewhere that you are not even familiar with because of maybe political persecution or religious or ethnic or whatever. So that is how it was. But he, as a Christian, and what I read about him and what I knew about him as a little boy, he wasn't the kind that would have wished for any violence or whatever. That's why they say, yes, let us go for independence gradually and not use the populist means that will bring about propaganda and make things get worse. And therefore, yes, people on the other side of the divide felt, yes, he was influential and all that. But as a person, he never, from what I read and what I know, he never waged for any violence or whatsoever. But it was the perception of others that, yes, if we don't nip him in the butt, definitely our political or ideological stance they are pushing wouldn't be fruitful.
So, while studying, you met him in Pretoria.
No, I met him in London.
You met him in London?
Yes, I was in Leeds, in England.
Okay. How did he react to the political persecution Mr. Sampine is talking about? Did he feel like a pariah, an outcast, chased out of the shores of his own country, or he felt it was a necessary evil for him to come back even stronger?
At that time, he had not been persecuted. This was the beginning. And he was there with R.R. Mponsa. They were there when Ghana was talking about independence. And they also went there to talk to the colonial government. Kwame Nkrumah wanted independence now. And they were saying that in the shortest possible time. I mean, there were differences. And they realized that the colonial government was trying to move faster. And they didn't agree, that is Buzia's faction. So they went to England. They came there many times and talked to the colonial government about their program. That is why Kwame Nkrumah used to tell, CPP used to tell them that it was slow and so on and so forth. But they knew what they wanted. They knew what was involved. It was not just saying independence now and then you get it. You plan to get it. You plan your course, you plan your people to be ready to receive it. And that was Buzia's form. And he used to tell me, Kabla, you come quickly and I have a lot for you to do, because I was then reading law and I hadn't finished. But when I came, I had a lot to do, but we never finished it.
Okay. I think because of the important program that was taking place in Chebi, marking the 75th anniversary of a very important chieftain of this country, we had to do a little hybrid of dress rehearsal. So we are now going live. Apologies to Mr. Sampine, and then a very important, Minister of State, and during the time of Professor. So we are going. I don't know. I wish we could have verbatim.
No.
Will be defined by integrity, sovereignty, a common ethos, discipline, and shared values, honor beyond aid.
Hello Ghana, you are tuned into the issues on GTV with me, Irbad Ibrahim. And today we are discussing the legacy of Dr. or Professor rather, Kofi Abrefa Buzia, his legacy to Ghana's democracy. And we couldn't have had a better deal than people who personally interacted with him at various levels during his childhood. And Mr. Sampine, who is currently the General Secretary of the ruling MPP in the Ashanti region, had the opportunity to live when his dad interacted with the former Prime Minister. Mr. Sampine, you're welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And then we couldn't have had a better person than someone who served in his government and understood his political philosophy. KG Osei Bonsu served as Minister for Security and State Protocol in the Second Republic. Sir, you're welcome.
My pleasure.
So I'll do a change of the dominoes now.
All right.
Mr. Sampine, you grew up a little child in Kumasi in Asante Mine. In other parts of the country, your dad was moving around. You had the opportunity to interact with the good old professor. What can you say about him even as a child?
Yes, that's an important thing as a child, and as somebody who believes that, yes, people that serve their country should be honored.
Yes, sir.
I took to liking the late Prof. Abrefa Buzia Kofi. He was my father's personal friend. And I remember when we were little boys, he came to Cape Coast before the coup in 1972 and had tea, and my father was liked coffee so much, he took coffee and Prof took tea. And I listened to some of the conversation, even though I was eavesdropping. And we couldn't have gone to sit with them, but we were eavesdropping. I heard lots of wisdom from them. He was so deep a thinker, and all the discussions that they had, I took a liking to the man. After that, I read some of his books, his works, and some snippets of writings that my father also left behind. I also went through, and therefore, he became an icon for me. His ideology, what he believed in, that people should develop as they wish in freedom, have their property, their assets, have education, and have all the good things in life. He was so pessimistic, optimistic about life that anything that he wanted to do, he felt that yes, they should go to a fruitful conclusion. And therefore, he's one person that Ghana shouldn't lose sight of, and that is a pleasure that we commemorate him on the 40th anniversary of his demise.
Honorable Mr. KG, what was the political climate? Of course, when Mr. Sampan was young, we were still in the independence struggle. What was the political climate, and what significant role did Professor Busia play in our struggle for independence?
Well, that was the very beginning of our struggle for independence. And he was then in England. And I think he came after the National Liberation Movement had been formed in Kumasi. He was with the United Party, then the National Liberation Movement, which was based mainly in Ashanti, was formed. And he was part of it. And he was in there with Victor Joa Pia Aramponsa. So these were the people who were holding the struggle for independence in Ashanti. And he was a strong man, capable, soft-spoken, but very steady and strong in his views. You could not meet Dr. Busia and forget him. Because he impressed you. Whatever he did, he had a teacher in him, and he would make sure that you understood exactly what he was saying. He had time for everybody. And that's why they elected him as leader to come to Parliament to represent Ashanti, because he was then representing Ashanti for the first time before independence. Great man as far as I'm concerned. When I knew him, he was fairly old. I was a young student reading, and I met him and my uncle Aram Bonsa in London on their visits to the colonial office to discuss the Ghanaian independence. And anytime I visited them, I went back home feeling elated, having met him. I didn't know him, but having met him, it was just something good for me. And I think I never forgot him until I finished and came back home. And I had no choice but to join him.
Mr. Sampai, in Africa's struggle for independence, intellectuals found themselves in a catch-22 situation. Some were considered hardliners, and some were seen as sellouts, people who could easily make compromise, even though soft-spoken. Under which of the two classifications would you place Professor Busia?
Well, he was, to me, a very strong person who wanted freedom for his people. But I also believe that freedom should come when we are prepared for it. And therefore, you could classify him as such. He wasn't somebody who was ready to sell out his nation or his country. This is something that I know about Professor Ebrifa Busia. Let me give you an example. When, after the coup in 1966, he came over, then they formed the Center for Civic Education, which is the equivalent of the NCC now. The sole responsibility of that organization was to educate the Ghanaian about our civic responsibilities. What was good for us to do as citizens, what we shouldn't do as citizens, and what we did and that which was going to take Ghana to the pedestal that we wanted to reach. And therefore, if you have such a character, you definitely cannot prescribe him to the being of sellouts. So he was somebody, that's what I said in my opening remarks, that he was very optimistic about life. He wanted to make sure that every single Ghanaian had the pleasures of being a Ghanaian. And therefore, though soft-spoken, though trained as a Christian, he was very hard heart, big mind, wanted to do what was right for the people, and therefore you cannot classify him as a seller, but rather somebody who a liberator, let me put it that way.
So whether overtly or covertly, he didn't have any confrontation with the British, governor or any of the officials.
Historically, there's nothing like that. They had, as Ambassador said, discussions with them. They went to the Home Office in the United Kingdom of the purpose of making sure that yes, we attain the best for Ghana. And therefore, that was whatever he did with them. But as to covert operations, something that was going to be, that's why I said that you cannot classify him to be a seller, because he never did that. He always did things in the open. Whatever action that the old prof and the UP traditions and those who believed in the freedom for Ghana gradually did was in the open. Nobody hid behind anything to do any bad things against the nation. Therefore, going to history, you wouldn't find any such records.
Sir, there's one thing that permeates the, submissions that are being made, that he was a religious man. And religiosity has become quite a scarce commodity to find. In our fight against corruption, in our fight against, other governance excesses. What role did religion play in his worldview as an individual who later became the Prime Minister of the Republic of Ghana?
Well, I think he was made up by religion. He was tutored in religion, and he believed in religion and lived it. He was very much against corruption, because in his very first year, all his statements were against corruption. He accused Kwame Nkrumah's government of corruption. And even though they didn't say it, they agreed, because some of their members had been prosecuted. Some of their deputy ministers had been prosecuted by the colonial government for corruption. So obviously he was in agreement with the colonial government as far as corruption is concerned. And he talked a lot about it. We didn't listen. Ghanaians did not listen. And I think corruption is still in this country. And I'm sure if he had continued, he had been allowed to continue his government for some time, he would have tried to eradicate that, if you could, because it's a human failing.
Before assuming the reins of power, and you were in charge of security in his time, what role...
In fact, even before you go on with that, the corruption issue,
yeah,
it is on record that he did a famous statement in the February of 1971, when he said the biggest challenge that confronted his government was bribery and corruption. And therefore, he was poised to make sure, if it's not eliminated complete, it is brought to the most minimal level. And therefore, he's somebody from the records and from the hands of Parliament. He's somebody that you cannot touch him. After his overthrow, all that he said about him, there was no single statement of corrupt action by his person or his executive that he ruled with us as a prime minister.
So he led quite an austere and ascetic life. He wasn't, he didn't enjoy opulence. He was an
No.
academic. He was a friend to books, you would say.
Apart from that, this corruption. On one occasion, he sacked 2 ministers the same day in his government. I was there for corruption. 2 ministers for alleged corruption. And he asked them to explain what he had heard. Go and write and come and tell me what you knew about ABCD. If you knew that you were involved, write to tell me that you were involved and you go. If not, I will sack you at the appropriate time. In 24 hours, 2 ministers were sacked.
Would you say that is something that has been missing since 92?
This
Our
was
contemporary leaders seem to be a bit coy about throwing the appointees under the bus, so to speak. We only change the setup.
Yes,
So would you say it's something our current leaders, regardless of which party is in power, should learn from?
they should, because if we do that, then the others who are coming in will also know that if they misbehave, this is their way out. That's all. If you are corrupt, you don't stay on. If you are not corrupt, you stay on. That's all.
Mr. Sampai, did he leave any huge estate? Can we trace Professor's name to an offshore account? What kind of a person was he?
I wouldn't want to say somebody used something when we had the burial service for the late J.H. Mensah, that the friend said, he died almost a pauper.
Yes.
Prof do some private few estates, his personal house that he built before he became even the prime minister. When you go to Wenchi, you find it there, closer to the royal family house. The house that he bought at Odoko, that he worked from, and that he used on small vehicle, and people felt he was endangering his life because as the prime minister would drive that small vehicle to work at the castle, and that is the mark of the late professor. No offshore accounts, no inshore accounts, nothing. He came to serve the people of Ghana. He left painfully, though, without achieving the purpose, the objective, the goals that he wanted to achieve for the people of Ghana. But there's one thing about him: nobody, not his bitterest of enemies or opponents, can go and tell the world that this is a property that the late prof acquired illegally.
Not even a champion.
You served under him.
Yes.
I'm sure you had a fat salary.
I'm biased. I am not biased.
Did you have the kind of emoluments current government appointees have in his time?
Emoluments. We didn't have money. At that time when it came, Ghana, we were in trouble. The country was in trouble. So you couldn't be dishing monies out. No way. No. Everything was structured properly, straight, as we could afford as a country.
So it was self-imposed austerity,
Yes.
you would say.
Yes. We had to do that.
Mr. Sampai, what was the state of food security in his time? Did he contribute to agriculture? Because his nemesis, a champion who overthrew him, is credited for coming up with self-help policies.
This
like Operation Feed Yourself.
Champion came with Operation Feed Yourself. But you ask questions. Let's go back and ask questions. What formed the basis for the Champion's Operation Feed Yourself? The late Prof started the Rural Development Program, had a ministry for that. Incorporated in that was the development of the people there through agriculture, education, and no. I quite remember my hometown, Fijaji Tuari in the Ashanti region. The first time we had generated power and a town's water system and a clinic was by Professor Buzia. The people were encouraged to go into farming.
Yes.
That was when they started with little bits of mechanization of agriculture. When you look at the tonal fields and the Kwabenya or what, that on the Sogapupe Road, that irrigation project played an immense role in setting up all of these sites, and they were all linked to agriculture. He also brought in trained lots of extension officers, especially to help with the cocoa sector. They saw that yes, our forests were being degraded, and that's when he introduced the planting of the teak trees, something that the PNDC, NDC started using for electrification projects, so for reforestation. So he was very much into making sure that yes, we grew what we could to eat and export, possibly. But you see, he lasted for just 21 or 23 months.
Yes, 3 months.
So about 27 months.
27
he left for 27 months. So you wouldn't see it very much, but I believe the little I did, that was where a champion and Redfield, yes, let's build on, because
Then what could have been the reason of a champion and other soldiers to have carried out the coup if the man was doing fairly well?
Champon was ambitious. He wanted to be head of state. And when the time came for the government to appoint a brigade command for the southern sector, Champon's name appeared many times, but he was rejected. I know. The Central Intelligence Committee rejected him. The National Security Council rejected him. Cabinet rejected him. But at some time during the getting to the end of the year, we traveled. That is, I and some of these intelligence people traveled. When we came back, I read this that same evening that the Champon had been made 1st Brigade Commander. And I checked. I called the intelligence officer from the military, and he told me that Prof was advised by a certain general to take a Champon, because when a Champon was in Western region, he had he had contracted some debts which Prof paid for him, and therefore he would be loyal to him. They sat on this matter for about 3 days, and the military wouldn't agree. The intelligence officer would not agree. So when I came back from my visits, I went to Prof the next morning. And as soon as he saw me, he was laughing. He knew why I was there. And he said, "Come now, why?" And I said, "Oh, I need to talk to you about ABCD, the appointment of a Champon. I have seen it in the minutes. I wonder why it came." So he said, "All right, give me another 24 hours. I'll discuss it with you." So I went and discussed it with him, and he said he would have to write to the president, that is Ibrahim Akufo-Addo, Nana-Addo's father, to withdraw that recommendation, because he agreed that all of them, all the sectors, did not want a Champon. Unfortunately, he did not do it. And this was the end of December 1971. The Champon was hanging in there, and the coup was 13th of January 1972. Prof had gone to Britain. We had a visitor here, Mrs. Nixon. And when Mrs. Nixon left for Ivory Coast, Prof went to Britain because he had to go and check his eyes. and that was Monday. He left on Monday. The coup was on Thursday. He called me, or rather I called him on a friend's phone. And he said, Komna, I understand there is one Ayite Champong who had organized the coup in Accra. And I said, no, sir. It is no Ayite Champong. It is I.K. Champong, the officer you appointed 1st Brigade Commander. And he said, what? And for some time he wasn't talking, so I called back. I said, are you there, Paul? He said, yes, I am. All right, come now, let us discuss this one in the evening, because I'm going to Ivory Coast from here. I didn't have the time to do that again because I was personally arrested and detained in Ashafort that same evening. So I never had the time to talk to him again. But he was shocked by Champong's.
Would you term that a betrayal of trust of an epic proportion? And were there any other internal collaborators?
I would say that's as a Macbethian style. If you read Shakespeare and you look at Macbeth, his overambitiousness brought his death. And that's exactly what happened to Champong. Because if you read the history books, if you get narratives from ambassador and the rest, and they tell you, His Excellency, they tell you the history of Champong. Incidentally or coincidentally, he happens to be a relation of my wife.
Champong.
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
An in-law he would have been.
Yeah, some kind of in-law, yes. So you look at the stories, and because they had no basis whatsoever to have that coup d'etat in 1972. What they told the people of Ghana, nothing. The soldiers, ambitious, they also wanted to rule, paint the politician as a criminal. At the end of it, nobody was caught in any web as a criminal. The economy that they came to meet was intact then, and therefore I would describe that as the ambition of Macbeth incarnated in a Champong to become the head of state.
I'm sure the Vietnam and Korean Wars had just happened after the Second World War, when in 1945 the United Nations Organization was formed. And the battle between the communist USSR and a capitalist West. Many a times when coups are mentioned in Ghana, then we are told declassified documents pointed to one intelligence agency having played a role. You sat on the top of our security issues. Were there any external influences in the overthrow of Professor Busia? And if yes, why? What was the motive?
No, there were no external influences. This was Ghanaian. There were some other groups within the military who were also organizing. So I do not even think that Champong had enough time to prepare the coup, because the reasons he gave were that, well, the soldiers were not receiving sugar and milk and so on. Later on, he added the what did we do? The government
wasn't paying them well.
No, the government, we devalued.
The cedi.
Yes, we
They
devalued.
devalued the currency at
the
the time.
currency at that time.
Was it an IMF sort of thing at that
It
time?
must have been. Must have been. But you see, this was not the reason why a champion did the coup, because he didn't say it. It was said afterwards, after he had done the coup, that he had stayed the coup and taken over, and we had all been imprisoned and others were outside. Then they tried to find out some good reasons for organizing the coup. And then they said we had devalued. What did he do about the devaluation? Did he change it? No. The champion was just. Sorry.
Mr. Sampine, you have a series of events slated to mark the 40th anniversary of the demise of Professor Busia. Would you take us through in closing, because we have a few more minutes to go?
Yes, the foundation of Busia, in collaboration with the family and other well-wishers, are putting up an elaborate program to commemorate the 40th anniversary of the demise of the Prime Minister. This program is going to be on at the International Conference Center in Accra on Tuesday, 28th August 2018 at 3 p.m. We want people to go to work. Some of you will get time to come there. It's open to the public.
Okay.
You don't need special invitation. Some of the keynote speakers will be the President, His Excellency Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo. The person who's going to chair that program is going to be the former President, Mr. J. Kufuor, will be there. The Right Honorable Speaker of Parliament will give the keynote address there, and you have other speakers. So it's going to be an elaborate thing to showcase the life of a son not well sung, an icon that's hidden under some table, somebody that the young guys, people who are growing the politics, those who are into education should emulate. And it's going to be a solemn occasion, but we want to make it grand. We want all of us to be there so that the people of Ghana will know that yes, in the history of Ghana, we had other late presidents. He wasn't a president because that time between 69 and 72 that he was overthrown, we practiced the Westministerial type of government where the Prime Minister was the head of state government and we had a ceremonial president who happened to be the late Mr. Edward Akufo-Addo, the father of His Excellency Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo. So that is the program for the 28th. Over the week, after the program, after the weekend, there will be a memorial service, and there will also be another program in his hometown for the family, that is Wenchi, in the Brong-Ahafo region, to also meet with the people in the royal family, to also sing the songs of their departed royal son.
Honorable Minister, would you want to see Ghana do more to remember some of the sacrifices Professor did for this republic? Would you make recommendations for the inculcation of some of the things that have been discussed there into our educational curricula? Because there is a dearth or scarcity of information in terms of what he really represented.
I think all this is available. It's a matter of getting it together and talking to the educational people to help us disseminate. All this is available. There is a lot about Busia and his educational programs. And this should be done now. This is the time that we should together do it. It's from education, so we are talking to the right person.
Okay.
Yes.
In your final remarks, I'll start with you, Mr. Sampine. There is consensus around this table that he was an anti-corruption campaigner. He made sure he safeguarded the national purse. What are some 3 key things you think are legacies that should carry on for centuries to come?
1, his honesty and the patriotism in him as a Ghanaian. 2, how he wished that every Ghanaian developed in the freedom the best of freedoms. And 3, the religious and moralities that we needed to showcase to the world as people. These are the 3 key things I believe about the late professor, his honesty, the need for us to develop well, and that moral upbringing was critical in the development of every nation.
But will memorial lectures whose contents and transcripts will not even go beyond the Accra International Conference Center be able to convey
it is not
such
going,
a good
it's
news?
going to go beyond that. The media is going to be there after the program. We wish to institute yearly lectures for him. Okay? Now in between, we want to organize other programs. People need to know about who the old prof was, what he meant for Ghana, and what he did for Ghana. And definitely, we're not going to leave the discussions within the confines of the Accra International Center on the 28th of August. It's going to go beyond that.
Honorable Minister, unfortunately in 30 seconds, you're a soft-spoken good old man. What legacy do you think your boss left with the Republic of Ghana?
Honesty, sincerity, honesty. If you ask me, the word is honesty. Serve this nation with honesty, and it will be enough. Just serve this nation with honesty. Be honest. I don't think we have had it. I haven't said it anywhere, and we must tell people to do that. We haven't done it, and we have failed him. I have failed him, as far as that is concerned, because I worked so closely with him. I knew almost everything that he was doing. He was honest and transparent throughout. And this is what we should do. Tell this nation, our leaders should do this, do that. They should be plainly honest.
Okay, thank you so much. A series of events to mark the 40th anniversary of the death of Ghana's former Prime Minister in the Second Republic, Professor K.A. Busia. We had in the studio Mr. Sampine, Regional Secretary of the ruling NPP in the Ashanti region. Sir, thank you so much for those insights. We also had Honorable Minister K.G. Osei-Bonsu, who served as Minister for Security and State Protocol in the government of Professor K. Busia. Sir, thank you so much for making time. You can catch a repeat of this program on Monday from 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. till we come your way next time with another edition of The Issues. A great thank you to the production crew headed by Executive Producer Elsie Tego and also Producer Director Akwesi Inche. Stay blessed and keep praying for Mother Ghana.